Number 1. The Piri Reis map. There is a map in the Topkapi Palace Museum in Istanbul that was drawn in 1513 on gazelle skin. It is approximately 90 centimeters by 63 centimeters. The ink has faded, but the lines are still precise. Along the left edge runs a coastline that was not supposed to exist for another 300 years. The map was made by an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis. He compiled it from source charts, and he said so in his own annotations written directly onto the parchment. He names 34 source documents. He describes some of them as very old. He describes one as having been drawn in the time of Alexander. The western portion of the map depicts South America. Cartographic historian Gregory McIntosh of the University of Hawaii analyzed the map's coordinates in his 2000 study published by Oxford University Press. He measured the depicted coastline against modern survey data and found the correspondence between the Piri Reis coastline and the actual South American coast accurate to within 1 degree of latitude across multiple reference points. In 1513, no European cartographer had surveyed the South American coast with that precision. The first systematic Portuguese survey of the Brazilian coastline was not completed until the 1540s. The southern portion of the map is more difficult to explain. Below South America, the map shows a continuous landmass curving eastward. Its coastline contains bays, inlets, and a mountain range positioned along the interior. In 1960, Captain Lorenzo Burrows of the United States Navy's Hydrographic Office compared the southern landmass to bathymetric survey data of the Antarctic continent collected by the International Geophysical Year Expedition of 1957. The correspondence he documented was passed to Professor Charles Hapgood of Keene State College, whose subsequent analysis, published in 1966, identified specific coastal features matching the Antarctic bedrock topography as mapped by seismic survey beneath the ice sheet. The mainstream explanation is that the southern landmass is a speculative continental extension, a tradition in classical and medieval cartography of assuming a southern landmass to balance the northern one. The correspondence to Antarctic topography is coincidental pattern matching applied to an ambiguous shape. McIntosh's analysis does not fully support the coincidence reading. The mountain range depicted on the southern landmass corresponds in position and relative scale to the Transantarctic Mountains. The Transantarctic Mountains are buried under between 1 and 3 kilometers of ice. Their position was not confirmed until seismic survey in the 20th century. A speculative landmass drawn from classical tradition would not contain a mountain range in the correct position. A map compiled from older source charts might. Piri Reis was executed in 1553 for reasons unrelated to cartography. His source charts have never been found. The map he made from them is in Istanbul. It has been there since 1513. The coastline it depicts has been there considerably longer. Number 2. The forgery in the Bineka. In 2021, a team of researchers at University College London published an analysis of the Vinland map in the journal Heritage Science. They had examined the ink using X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy. Their finding was precise. The ink's chemical composition was consistent with medieval manufacture. The carbon in the ink was old. The map was real. 6 months later, a reanalysis by researchers at the University of Arizona examined the same ink using a different methodology. They confirmed what the Field Museum in Chicago had found in 2004. The ink contained anatase titanium dioxide in a form that did not exist in commercial production before 1920. The Vinland map was a forgery. It had been made sometime in the 20th century by a person who understood medieval manuscripts well enough to use genuine parchment and age-appropriate binding. The ink betrayed them. The map had arrived at Yale's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library in 1959. It was purchased by Paul Mellon, the philanthropist, for $1 million. It was donated to Yale in 1965 alongside a genuine medieval text called the Tartar Relation, bound together as if they had always been a pair. Yale announced the acquisition with a press conference. The New York Times covered it on the front page. In the 50 years between acquisition and confirmed forgery, the Vinland map was cited in peer-reviewed studies of Norse exploration, pre-Columbian contact, and the history of cartography. It was the subject of 2 Yale University Press monographs. It was exhibited publicly. It was used as evidence. Historian Kirsten Seaver of the Norwegian American Historical Association, who argued for forgery from the early 2000s onward in studies including her 2004 book, published by British Library Publishing, identified the most likely forger as Joseph Fischer, a Jesuit priest and cartographic historian who had access to medieval manuscripts and the expertise to produce a convincing one. Fischer died in 1944. He could not be asked. The institutional failure is specific. The Beinecke Library is one of the most respected rare manuscript repositories in the world. Its authentication procedures are among the most rigorous in the field. For 50 years, those procedures did not catch a 20th century forgery on genuine medieval parchment. Every expert who examined it and declared it authentic was wrong. Every paper that cited it as evidence was citing a lie. The map is still at Yale. It has not been destroyed. It sits in the same collection where it has always sat, next to the Tartar relation it was paired with to make it credible. The forgery and its alibi, together in institutional custody, correctly catalogued. The catalog entry now says forgery. For 50 years it said medieval. The map did not change. The entry did. Number 3. The map that knew the Niger. In 1154, a geographer named Muhammad al-Idrisi completed a world map for Roger II, the Norman king of Sicily. The project had taken 15 years. Al-Idrisi had spent that time collecting testimony from merchants, sailors, and travelers passing through Palermo, which was then one of the most cosmopolitan ports in the Mediterranean. He interviewed them systematically. He recorded their routes, their distances, their landmarks. Then he drew. The map is known as the Tabula Rogeriana. It is held in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. It is oriented with south at the top, which is standard for Arabic cartographic tradition. When it is inverted to the northern orientation European readers expect, the Mediterranean coastlines resolve into recognizable shapes with measurable accuracy. The Niger River is in the map. Its source is shown in a highland region in the interior of West Africa. Its course runs westward and then bends south before reaching the coast. This is correct. Historian S. Maqbul Ahmad of Aligarh Muslim University documented this in his 1960 study in the journal Imago Mundi. He compared the depicted course against modern hydrographic survey data and found al-Idrisi's Niger within acceptable tolerance across its entire mapped length. European cartography did not achieve comparable accuracy for the Niger until Mungo Park's expeditions of 1795 and 1805. Park was the first European to confirm the river's direction of flow. He found the Niger flowing east, not west as European maps had assumed for centuries. Al-Idrisi had the direction correct 650 years earlier. The mainstream explanation is that Al-Idrisi's merchant testimony network extended further into sub-Saharan Africa than any documented European source. Trans-Saharan trade routes connected North African merchants to the Niger Bend region throughout the medieval period. The accuracy reflects the quality of his sources, not anything that should not have been possible. What the mainstream reading does not resolve is the source documentation. Al-Idrisi describes his methodology in the text accompanying the map. He names the types of sources he used. He does not name, for the Niger region specifically, any individual informant or trade route by name. The section covering West Africa is the least sourced portion of his commentary. The map in that region is among the most accurate. The accuracy and the silence about its origin arrived together. Roger II is buried in the Cathedral of Palermo. Al-Idrisi's map survived him by 8 centuries. The Niger is still where Al-Idrisi put it. Nobody has been able to explain in documented terms who told him. Number 4. The islands that weren't discovered. On a Portolan chart drawn in 1339 by a cartographer named Angelino Dulcert, there are 7 islands in the eastern Atlantic that are labeled by name. The chart is held in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. The islands are positioned at coordinates that correspond, within the margin of error of 14th century navigation, to the Canary Islands. They are named. They have individual coastline profiles. The largest is identifiable as Gran Canaria. The Canary Islands were officially rediscovered by a Portuguese expedition in 1402 under Jean de Bethencourt, sailing under Castilian license. The rediscovery was documented, celebrated, and used as the legal basis for colonial claim. Bethencourt's expedition is the official first contact. The Dulcert chart predates it by 63 years. Historian Tony Campbell, former map librarian at the British Library, analyzed the Dulcert chart in his study of Portolan cartography, published in the History of Cartography series by the University of Chicago Press in 1987. He confirmed the chart is genuine, correctly dated to 1339, and that the Atlantic islands depicted correspond in position and number to the Canaries. The document chain that follows is the Dread. A Genoese expedition to the Canaries is recorded in 1336, 3 years before the Dulcert chart. The expedition returned. Its findings were reported to the Genoese authorities. The report has not survived. A second Genoese expedition departed in 1341 under Portuguese license. Its navigational records were submitted to the Portuguese crown. Those records are not in any publicly accessible Portuguese archive. The Canary Islands were inhabited when Bethencourt arrived in 1402. The indigenous population, the Guanche, had no seafaring tradition and no contact with the outside world they could document. They did not know they had been charted 60 years before anyone came to claim them. The chart that proved prior knowledge was sitting in a French archive. It is still there. The colonial claim based on the official rediscovery was processed and enforced regardless. What the document trail shows is not discovery. It shows the management of what was already known. Number 5. The map that knew the Cape. In 1498, Vasco da Gama rounded the Cape of Good Hope and became, in the official record, the first European to demonstrate that the Indian Ocean was accessible by sea from the west. The achievement reshaped European trade, politics, and geography. It was treated as a discovery. Mauro's world map had shown this 48 years earlier. The Mauro Planisphere was completed in 1450 by a Venetian monk at the monastery of San Michele on Murano. It is held in the Biblioteca Nazionale Marciana in Venice. It depicts Africa as a continent with a southern tip, shows the ocean below it as open water connecting to the Indian Ocean, and includes a notation describing a ship that had sailed around the southern point of Africa from the eastern side. The notation names the voyage as having occurred approximately 1430 to 1435. No such voyage appears in any European record. Historian Piero Falchetta of the Marciana Library documented the commission records for the map in his 2006 study published by Terraferma. He confirmed that the Venetian Senate commissioned the map and that the Portuguese crown ordered a copy shortly after its completion. The copy was sent to Lisbon. The copy has not survived. The Portuguese crown classified its cartographic archive in the late 15th century under a policy known to historians as the Politica de Sigillo, the policy of secrecy. Outgoing navigational charts required royal license. Unauthorized copying was a capital offense. The archive itself was largely destroyed in the Lisbon earthquake of 1755. What survives is the sequence. Fra Mauro depicts a navigable southern route in 1450. The Portuguese crown requests a copy. The copy goes to Lisbon. The archive closes. 48 years later, da Gama sails the route the map already showed. Da Gama was treated as the discoverer. The map that preceded him is in Venice. The copy the Portuguese crown received is gone. The archive that would explain what they knew and when was destroyed by an earthquake. The sequence survived anyway. Number 6. The charts that burned. In 1558, a Venetian nobleman named Niccolo Zeno published a map and a set of documents he claimed were copies of letters written by his ancestors, the Venetian explorers Antonio and Niccolo Zeno, who had reportedly traveled the North Atlantic in the 1390s. The map depicted Greenland, Iceland, and several islands in the North Atlantic. The original letters and charts, Niccolo Zeno stated, had been found in a deteriorated state in the family archive and partly destroyed before he recognized their value. He had reconstructed them as best he could. The originals no longer existed. What the published map showed was Greenland without its ice sheet. The depicted coastline does not match the glaciated surface visible to any medieval sailor approaching Greenland by sea. It follows instead a coastline that sits beneath the ice. NASA's Operation Icebridge conducted aerial radar surveys of Greenland's subglacial bedrock between 2009 and 2019. Those surveys produced the first comprehensive map of the landmass beneath the Greenland ice sheet. Specific bays and inlets on the Zeno map correspond to bedrock features confirmed by the Icebridge data. The correspondence is not precise across the whole map, but it is not random in the areas where it appears. The mainstream explanation is that the Zeno map is a partial fabrication. Niccolo Zeno in 1558 was working from incomplete materials, filling gaps with speculation derived from other maps of his era. The correspondences to subglacial topography are coincidental pattern matching applied to an ambiguous shape. The problem the mainstream reading cannot fully resolve is the destruction of the originals. The chain of custody runs through a single man who had incentive to enhance his family's reputation, said the primary sources were too damaged to preserve, and published copies that cannot be authenticated against anything. Whether the bedrock correspondence is evidence or coincidence depends entirely on documents that are gone because the man who held them said they were. What survives is his version of what they showed. The ice survey confirmed parts of his version 5 centuries later. The documents that would explain how are the ones he destroyed. Number 7. The map that was stolen. In 1502, an Italian agent named Alberto Cantino was working in Lisbon on behalf of Ercole d'Este, the Duke of Ferrara. His assignment was to obtain Portuguese navigational intelligence. The Portuguese crown's cartographic archive was classified. Cantino bribed a cartographer. He paid 12 gold ducats for a copy of a chart that was not supposed to leave Portugal. He smuggled it to Ferrara inside a shipment of goods. The map he obtained is now called the Cantino Planisphere. It is held in the Biblioteca Estense in Modena. It depicts the Brazilian coastline, the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the eastern coast of North America, with accuracy that implies systematic Portuguese surveying prior to 1502. Pedro Álvares Cabral's official discovery of Brazil is dated to 1500. The Cantino map, drawn 2 years later, depicts a coastline that would require years of survey work to produce. The survey work is not in any official Portuguese record. Historian Armando Cortesão of the University of Coimbra analyzed the Cantino Planisphere in his 1954 study, published by the Junta de Investigações do Ultramar. He concluded that the map's accuracy for the Brazilian coast implied Portuguese knowledge of South America predating Cabral's voyage by at minimum several years. The Política de Sigilo had suppressed the prior voyages. Cabral's expedition was not a discovery. It was the official acknowledgement of knowledge that had been classified. The Cantino Planisphere exists because one man with 12 gold ducats and a shipment of goods moved faster than the policy of secrecy. The official record says Brazil was discovered in 1500. The stolen map says the coastline was already known, already charted, already in the archive that burned in 1755. The man who stole it saved the evidence. The policy that classified it destroyed everything else. Number 8. The map that was never for navigation. The Hereford Mappa Mundi is 5 feet tall and 4 feet wide. It is made from a single sheet of calfskin. It hangs in Hereford Cathedral in England, where it is hung, in various forms of display, since approximately 1300. It is oriented with east at the top and Jerusalem at the center. It is not a navigation document. No sailor ever used it to find anything. This is what makes what it contains difficult to explain. Historian Evelyn Edson of Piedmont, Virginia Community College documented in her 1997 study published by British Museum Press that 17 identifiable locations on the Hereford map correspond to physical survey data that does not appear in any known classical source available to a 13th century English cartographer. The locations include river systems in Central Asia, a coastal feature in the Horn of Africa, and a mountain configuration in the Caucasus region. Each one is positioned with accuracy that implies measurement, not speculation. The map's maker, identified by an inscription as Richard of Haldingham, was a Lincoln Cathedral official with no documented connection to exploration, trade, or geographic survey. He compiled the map from textual sources. The textual sources he would have had access to, the works of Ptolemy, Pliny, Solinus, and Orosius, do not contain the geographic data required to produce the 17 features Edson identified. The mainstream explanation is that Richard of Haldingham had access to sources that have not survived. Medieval manuscript transmission was incomplete and uneven. A Lincoln Cathedral official in the 1290s could have had access to Arabic geographic texts, merchant accounts, or Crusader survey documents that have since been lost. The accuracy reflects lost sources, not anomalous knowledge. The mainstream reading is reasonable. It requires the lost sources to have existed, to have reached Lincoln, and to have been used by a cathedral administrator with no documented interest in geography, who then encoded them in a theological document never intended for practical use. The sources left no other trace. The accuracy they produced is in Hereford Cathedral. It has been there for 700 years. No one has found the sources. Only the map they would explain. Number 9. The Islands in the Wrong Ocean. The Pisagano chart is a Portolan chart drawn in 1424. It is held in the James Ford Bell Library at the University of Minnesota, in the western Atlantic, at a position corresponding to approximately 40 degrees north latitude and 75 degrees west longitude. The chart depicts 2 large islands. They are colored differently from the surrounding ocean. They are labeled. The labels are in a hand consistent with the rest of the chart. The islands are called Antilia and Sataneses. Those coordinates correspond to the Caribbean and the eastern seaboard of North America. In 1424, no European voyage to those coordinates is recorded in any surviving document. Columbus did not sail until 1492. Historian Joaquim Gaspar of the University of Lisbon analyzed the Pisagino chart's projection system in his 2013 study published in the journal Imago Mundi. He found that the positioning of Antillia and Satanas is not the result of cartographic convention or speculative island placement. Portolan charts used a consistent projection derived from compass bearings and estimated distances. The islands on the Pisagino chart are placed within that projection at coordinates that imply navigational data. Someone gave the cartographer bearings and distances to islands in the western Atlantic in 1424. The mainstream explanation is that Antillia and Satanas are legendary islands derived from Iberian and Arabic mythological geography. Their placement reflects the conventional position assigned to mythological Atlantic islands in the Portolan tradition, not navigational data. Gaspar's analysis directly addresses this. The conventional position for legendary Atlantic islands in the Portolan tradition places them significantly further east. The Pisagino Islands are positioned further west than any comparable legendary island on any earlier chart. The shift westward is consistent with a navigator reporting actual bearings rather than a cartographer placing a mythological island in its traditional position. The chart is from 1424. Columbus sailed in 1492. The 68 years between them contain a document that places islands in the correct ocean at coordinates derived from what appears to be navigational data. The voyage that produced the data is not recorded anywhere. Number 10. The coast that had no name. The Genoese world map of 1457 is held in the Biblioteca Medicea Lorenziana in Florence. It is a large circular map drawn on vellum. In its southern portion below the Asian landmass, it depicts a continuous coastline running east to west across the bottom of the known world. The map's own legend describes this coastline as reported by merchants traveling eastern trade routes. It is not labeled as speculative. It is drawn with the same line weight as the documented coastlines above it. No classical source depicts a southern landmass at this position. Ptolemy, whose geography dominated medieval European cartography, showed the Indian Ocean as an enclosed sea with Africa and Asia connecting at the bottom. The Genoese map shows open water south of Africa and a separate southern landmass below it. This configuration was not confirmed by European exploration until the late 15th and early 16th centuries. The map's attribution to merchant testimony is the problem. Historian Piero Falchetta, in his analysis of 15th century Venetian and Genoese cartographic sources, found no surviving Genoese trade record that documents a merchant route reaching the southern latitudes required to observe the coastline the 1457 map depicts. The Genoese merchant network was extensive and its records were kept carefully. The route that would explain the southern coastline is not in them. The map cites sources that do not appear to have existed. The coastline it depicts from those sources corresponds to a configuration not confirmed for another 50 years. Both things are true simultaneously. Every map in this video has the same structure beneath the surface. Something is depicted that should not be possible to depict. The source that would explain it is gone, or classified, or was never recorded. What survives is the line on the parchment and the silence where the explanation should be. The Piri Reis map's source charts were never found. The Zeno originals were destroyed before anyone else saw them. The Portuguese archive burned in an earthquake. The Genoese merchant routes that reached the Southern Ocean left no record. The person who told Ali Idrisi where the Niger was did not leave a name. The maps survived. They have always been in institutional custody. They have always been available for examination. What they show has been visible for centuries. What they mean requires a source nobody can produce. The line is there. The hand that drew it knew something. What it knew, and where that knowledge came from, is the question every one of these archives leaves open, and none of them answer it.